Good morning, Proximity. We have an exciting announcement. Next Sunday, we are back in St. Stephen's School. That's in Stittsville. So that'll be Sunday, July 12th at 10 a.m. And you can go to our website to find out more information. As always, you can donate and give your offering online by pressing the donate button at the top of the page, then clicking this button, and then you can fill in your information and you're good to go. If you'd like to arrange a physical pickup, then you can contact Pastor Jason by email. And let's join in with Galen for some worship.
Such boundless grace, the God morning, Proximity. Hi, I'm Heather. Welcome to Sunday morning. If it's Sunday morning when you're watching this, I'm not sure. Whenever it is, welcome. And don't worry, I know things look a little bit different, but Jay is around here somewhere. I'm not sure where he is, but anyway, I'm here. So there you go. I wanted to invite you into a conversation that I've had with my friend Natasha. We've been friends for a long time, and we've never had to talk about race, or I guess it just never came up in conversation until recent events brought it to that. And we are taking this as an opportunity to strengthen our friendship. And I am taking it as an opportunity to learn from her. And I think that this conversation that we have is really important, and we need to be having more of them. And so I really hope that you're encouraged this morning by it. Social media can be so big and alienating, and where do we start? What kind of things can we do? And I think that is really the heart of most people, that they want to have conversations, just don't know where to start, don't know where to begin, feeling a lot of weight, and what can we do about it. And so we tend to not do anything and just turn things off, but do be a part of conversations, and I invite you to enjoy this one this morning and learn from it like I have. And today I'm going to talk to my friend Natasha Rubin Coupland. And Natasha and I have been friends for 21 years. So that's a long time. I know you think I'm so young, but anyway, we've been friends for a long time, right, Nat?
Yep. Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, we met in King Street. So I'll just give you a little bit of background. We met in King Street, which is in Oshawa, a church where our husbands were both on staff together. And we just became instant friends. Like, we just hit it off. It was awesome to have a new friend like Natasha. She was just so much fun and so confident. And we have funny stories of when we met, and we like to go over them again. And Natasha, you were with me. Do you remember the night that I found out that I was pregnant for Naomi? I was sick as a dog, and Jade took me to a small hospital, to the Emerge, and they told me I was pregnant. But I called you before this, and I said, hey, can you come over and watch the kids? I have to go to the hospital. I'm so sick. So you came over and stayed with the kids, and when I got back, I told you the news, and you were the first one to find out.
Yeah.
Next to Jay. So
Yeah.
we have a lot of good memories together. And
I remember saying, Heather, I remember you saying to me the funniest thing. You said, nothing. I said, what's wrong? Did they figure it out? And you said, nothing 9 months won't cure.
I don't remember that, so that's good. That's funny. And I remember when you were pregnant for Olivia, I remember being in your living room and you were just eating crackers like crazy. And I was like, hey, are you pregnant? You're like, nope.
Yeah.
Nope. That was pretty cute.
Yeah.
So way back, we have a lot of good memories. And we wanted to talk today, if you're watching this now or you're watching it later, we wanted to talk about our friendship, and with everything that's going on in the world right now, the horrible things that have been happening that we've been seeing on the news with regards to racial injustice in the States with George Floyd and so many others. It's just become such a big thing, and it's in front of us, and we can't turn it off as much as we'd like to, but we have to learn how to work through this and to help bring change in this area. So Natasha and I thought that we could have a conversation about our friendship, and we're going to just talk back and forth with each other and learn from each other. I have learned so much already from just talking with Natasha. And so we're going to get started. So I wanted to know, Natasha, how has this last month been for you?
Yeah, so it's been it's really kind of, just to backtrack a little bit on us meeting. Yeah, it was you were one of my first friends when we first, because you and Jay were in ministry for a bit longer, and when we met, that was like the first church, first time being a pastor's wife, and you just made it so great, and you were such an amazing example, and took me under your wings and that. So it's just been such fond memories of that season. And I'm really grateful that we've been able to keep our friendship, even though we've moved like further and further apart physically, but just always reconnecting whenever we get a chance, if we're in town or whatever. It's just great. We just pick up where we left off. So really grateful for that, that the Lord have allowed us to have that over the years. So yeah, how has the last month been? You know, it's already been a month. And if you're watching this in the future, maybe it's been longer, but it's been an interesting month. I would say that it's been actually a good month. And it probably is not the word that someone would expect from me to say that it's been a good month. And the reason why it was, I'm going to explain why it was a good month, is because, as I've shared with you, I'm happy to be alive in this season as a Black woman, because the needle is shifting, and there's a trajectory shift in history right now, as a result of a very tragic thing. One incident of many, but this one has caught the attention of the world, and caught the attention of everyone. And because it caught the attention, it is going to incite change in our world. So that's why I describe it as a good month, where many might think it was a difficult month or a hard month, and it has been those things as well. But yeah, so that was, and I'll just kind of go back about 4 Sundays ago when you texted me. It was the first Sunday after the George Floyd video, and there was a lot going on and a lot in the media. And I had just finished watching our sermon. So if you're watching this in the future, this is right during COVID, and finished watching our sermon where our pastor is white, and invited a Black pastor to share. And it was such a beautiful and authentic message. And then I got a text from my friend Heather, and it was incredible. And it's not uncommon for Heather to text me, so it wasn't that I got the text and it was incredible, but it was what the text said. And you reached out in such a simple and authentic way that it almost brought me to tears, Heather. It was just kind of like, hey, with everything that's going on, how are you? And I thought you would actually watch the same sermon as me, because that was one of the takeaway from our Sunday message. And it literally, the text came immediately after we just turned off the live feed. So I said, did you watch? And you're like, no. So maybe it was the Lord, but it was incredible. The fact that, and we'd been friends for so long, and we never really talked about this kind of stuff. We talked about a lot of stuff, and slept in each other's homes and like all those types of things, and ate meals together and watched each other's kids, but we just never had that conversation. So you reaching out it really, it meant a lot. It meant a lot. And I couldn't help but think, how did you feel? Like, as I was processing, I was like, I wonder what caused her to reach out, or how that felt to reach out.
Well, I felt nervous, which is funny because we do text back and forth all the time. But this was different. This was 2 things. I felt nervous because what if this is really affecting Natasha and she just doesn't want to talk about it? And so I guess I was a little concerned about maybe a reaction, although I've never known you to, what really probably made me send the text was, I know Natasha's character. Like, I know her. I know that she will, you always have a way of just making things make sense. And so I was feeling really stressed. And then I thought, well, if I'm feeling stressed and this is all going on, how are you feeling? Like I just couldn't stop thinking about that. And I guess in some ways, I wanted you to soothe my white guilt, if I'm being honest. And if we're watching this, I thought, here's my friend Natasha, who she can just speak to this, and it would make sense in my life. And so it was different, that's for sure. But I felt like I had to text you. Like I just had this impulse, like I needed to, and I was glad that you were able to share lots of information with me since. But at that time, you sent me a link and said, we'll talk. Mm-hmm. And we have been talking ever since.
Yeah, and it's as uncomfortable, and I used to, because subsequent to your text, I also received about 4 or 5 other texts from other white friends, white colleagues, and peers. And what I felt every single time, I was really grateful, because as I was saying to you, it would be kind of awkward if I reached out. But you reaching out to me and feeling the discomfort or not knowing what to say. And really, historically, especially as Canadians, we tend to we don't want to offend anyone, guys. Like we're so like, oh, we might say the wrong thing, we might offend. And that has been the silence that has actually, in the past month, that has been the topic of like the lack of, the fear of saying the wrong thing has kept people silent. Mm-hmm. And the fear of saying the wrong thing has led to saying nothing, which is part of the systemic issues, which we'll talk about later. But that is a discomfort. And so, and you being uncomfortable opening the door gave me actual freedom to start to have a conversation. So the fear of saying something, but the courage to say something essentially opened up the door to have great conversations, which is what's actually happened in the last month. And then when I describe the month as being great, conversations have happened because people weren't afraid to just say, I don't know what to say, but I just want to listen. And that was some of my other peers when they said kind of like, I don't know, but it was always met, and I believe it's met with openness of like, you invite me to talk and share, and then, from there we learn a lot.
Yeah, we do. And it's so true that the internet can be so alienating, and we're supposed to take in all this information that people are throwing at us, or we're trying to read. Who do we read? Who do we look to? And so having actual real life conversations takes away that alienation. Like, oh, okay, there is a lot going on in the world, and there's a lot that we can't do about it, but there are a lot of things that we can do about it. So tell us a little bit, Natasha, what was it like growing up in Ontario? You and I are the same age, born in the same year, and I think that was part of our connection. Mm-hmm. That we grew up in Ontario, and you were in the Toronto area, but what was it like growing up as a Black girl, Black woman in Ontario for you?
Yeah, and just to go back on what you just said about the internet can be alienating. And I believe the power of connecting with someone that you know and hearing their story is brings so much more context and creates so much more empathy for the cause, because it's just not a person on a screen. It's someone that you know, and that's really the power that comes, right? Because you know the story. And so I was born in Trinidad, and I know a lot of Canadians think that all Black people are from Jamaica, but I'm not from Jamaica. So if you're watching this and you're Jamaican, I love you. But I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and so I came here as a little girl in late 1970s. My mom actually came under the domestic program under Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And that was the season in the 60s and 70s. We know that's when immigration into North America for West Indians came under that domestic program. And so, yeah, we were very fortunate to be able to come to Canada. It was myself, my mom, my brother, and I have another sister as well. And I have other sisters, but they didn't come at that time. So yeah, I grew up right in Toronto in a not so great area. And, but what was interesting is that my mom really valued education. So we did not come from any means whatsoever. You know, like my family never ever owned a car. We took the bus every single place, right? Living in Toronto is kind of easy to do that. But my mom knew that when she came here, her was for opportunity. And the immigrant story in Canada is that of opportunity. People come to Canada for themselves and their children to have a better future. And yeah, so her value of education was huge. And so she actually would send me to a different area to go to school. So I didn't go to school in my neighborhood school or my home school, as we call it now. I was, she sent me like across to a nicer neighborhood. So I was fortunate to be, I feel, surrounded by a lot of, actually I was surrounded by all white people, to be honest, at my school. So as a little kid, I would, you know, I was just saying to my daughter a few minutes ago, I really should have a lot more baggage than I do. But, you know, because I went to school in a pretty much all white school. It was three black kids, I believe. And yeah, it was definitely, I definitely knew I was different, right? Like it was known to me, and kids kind of just say what's on their mind. So I kind of grew up in the school of hard knocks in a sense when it came to bullying, and mostly because of the color of my skin. And I feel that in my formative years, my mom was great at always kind of preparing us in a way that, you know, I'd come home and you'd say, oh, this kid is making fun of me because, you know, calling me these names. And I remember my mom, and she knew the Lord, and I really believe this really made a big difference. Just coaching me on not letting it stick and not carrying it and not taking it on, because, you know, those are hard things for kids to go through, right? Whether it's back then or now. So yeah, growing up in Toronto, great place, very multicultural, had a lot of great friends from all over the world. And funny story, I'll tell you just one story I shared with you about going for a job interview. So I was probably late teens, and I went for a job interview, and I'm saying all this to just kind of point out that we all have unconscious biases, right? There's certain, like, there'll be stereotypes. We think about certain people that don't look like us. And when we encounter people that don't look like us, especially being kids sometimes, like little kids just kind of say it, you know. As adults, we've learned to maybe not say it as nice Canadians. But my maiden name is Ruben. And so I went for a job interview one day. I needed a summer job, and I saw, that's when we used to look for jobs in the newspaper.
Yeah. We are old.
Right? We are definitely old. And so I called, and they said, yep, come in, you know, we're interviewing, come in for the interview. And it was at a law firm. And I came in, and a nice, very aggressive older gentleman comes out, and he looks at me, and he says, he looks down at my application, and he looks at me, and he says, you don't look like a Natasha Rubin. And so that might not mean a big deal to a lot of people. They'd be like, what's the big deal? But that's a simple example of someone having, you have like prejudging, in a sense of, my name didn't reflect a typical Black name. My last name being like a Jewish heritage. You know, and that's just a small thing. I wouldn't say that was a racist act by any means, but what it was that he was coming from a place that's not a name that a Black person would have, essentially, is what it meant, right? And how I received it. And I had enough actual inner strength, and thankful to my mom, she really taught us how to be able to build bridges. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could be like, you know, you're an absolute jerk and I'm out of here. But I actually had the courage to say to him, I go, well, what does a Natasha Rubin look like? And in that moment, Heather, what it allowed for him, and he would probably have been 55 at least at that time, right? In that moment, what I was able to do was challenge in a way that could build a bridge, challenge
Mm-hmm.
the unconscious bias that he had and didn't even realize. And then we talked back and forth. Well, the long story short, I did get the job, and but I was able to show him that he just thought that a different type of person was walking in the door,
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we tend to all have these unconscious biases. And I know you'd shared a story. You shared a similar story with me.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing some work stuff. Remind me of that one.
Yeah, well, I have been so made aware this last month, just in talking to you about the things that I take for granted and that I have prejudices towards and biases. So, yes, a friend told me to go to Leon's and ask for Gary, who works there. He's a salesman. And she talked Gary up all the time. He was great, he's just this guy. So in my head, Gary is an older white guy. Maybe he's bald. Maybe he has a toupee. I don't know. Gary to me was just a white man name. And anyway, when I met him, I asked for Gary and they went and got him. And along comes this really nice looking young black man. And I was so nice. Like, I'm really embarrassed actually, but I want to be vulnerable and share this. I was just so embarrassed that I said, oh, are you Gary? And he said, yep. And I said, are you sure there's not another Gary? Like, oh my goodness. I made such an idiot of myself. And he had a big smile on his face and said, nope, I'm the only Gary here. And I sounded so foolish, and we ended up talking, and he even hugged me at the end. I could have cared less that he was black. It didn't matter to me that he was black, but in my head, I was expecting to see this white man. And that has really stuck with me as a learning thing, and I'm really quite embarrassed by it. But anyway, just to say, yeah, we have these biases, we have these preconceived ideas in our head, and they really don't serve us or anyone else. So now that, like, when I'm aware of these things, I'm, able to make changes for sure.
Yeah.
And I do think that you have just been gracious and shared so much. I know not everybody responds the same way you do, Natasha. And like you said, your relationship with the Lord and just overcoming and being able to challenge people and their assumptions, I think has been really great. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about your thoughts on the concept of white privilege, which, we may not have grown up with that term, but we're certainly coming to understand that, because I know when we talked the first time, you said, like, have you ever been concerned you might not get a job because of the color of your skin? And I said, well, no, like, that's never, ever crossed my mind. And so you start unpacking, what are the other things that I take for granted? So I'm wondering if you can share a bit about that, our privilege as white people, and sort of what it looks like, maybe on a practical level.
Yeah, and that's, that term has been floated around. Well, it's been out there for a bit, but of course, any white person living right now has heard it recently. And when taken at face value, it's like, well, I'm not privileged. Like, there are poor white people. Like, not every white person is wealthy or had an easy life. And so I think at face value, the term can be like, well, what are you talking about? I've worked hard for everything I have. And that actually is not what the term is meaning. And it's not meaning that like you should be less, or you should be ashamed or feel guilty because of the color of your skin, right? Because God created us all unique and different. And I shared this story with you, and it's just an example, just to kind of illustrate to illustrate the point of white privilege. When I was in high school, a good friend of mine, we were in the library, and we had magazines. And again, kids probably don't go to libraries these days, but back when we were kids, back in the day, they would have like all of the magazines on this like kind of along the racks. And our school probably had 50 magazines. Like there were tons, everything, right? From National Geographic to Cosmo, to like, to Chatelaine, whatever. And there were two Black subscription magazines that actually probably is the same today. It was Ebony and Essence. And, during the 70s, those came out, and into the 80s and 90s, really to be able to represent Black people. And so I was sitting at the table looking at this magazine, which in the magazine, yeah, everyone was Black, like, because it was designed so that I could see people like myself in those magazines. And, today we're fortunate to see more Black faces on TV and not in a derogatory way, right? Because the media has painted typically, and in cinema and shows, whether we want to admit it or not, typically either the Black kids are getting into trouble, they're gangsters, the person at the boardroom table is a white male. Like, even as women, like the glass ceiling is only recently being lifted where women are being portrayed in roles that we can aspire to. So yeah. I remember looking at this magazine, and my friend comes by and she's like, "What are you looking at?" And you know how kids are. And she look at this magazine, and she takes it out of my hand and she starts flipping through the magazine. And she says, "There's not one white person in this magazine." And I was like, and I was very calm because I'm just so, I guess you get used to it in a way, you get numb. And I pointed at the shelf with the 50 magazines or however many there were. And I said, "You see all of those? Those are like every single one of those. They're filled with people that look like you. And I've got like one, and you're getting upset because there's one magazine that reflects even my hair type, right? All those women in those magazines up there all have straight hair." And so she didn't have any, and I think in that moment there was that kind of right? Because sometimes we look at what we don't look at what we have. And I think it's human nature where we, as kids, we look at what we look at what we don't have, and we're like looking and going, "Oh, how come they get to, how come she gets to have one?" Well, yeah, I'm 50. And you're like looking and saying, "Well, how come she's getting one now?" It's because she never had access. She's never had access to any of it. And it's just so normal that you've always had access because you didn't, the color of your skin wasn't a barrier. And 400 years of history in North America didn't dictate that you represented something not as good as. And the doors weren't open. My husband and I were having a conversation last night. And Kevin, for those who are watching, my husband is Caucasian that don't know us. But he said to me, he goes, "I've never gone somewhere and like didn't think," and actually we recounted one situation that he could think of where he like thought that he couldn't just go and show up and be. And there is kind of this always, like there's a possibility that I will be judged preliminary, not by who I am, but by the way I look. And that's, we know that happens. It's not made up. It's not in my head. It definitely, so it's, the term white privilege, it's a tough word, but I hope that people can see it not as privilege in terms of actual tangible, but just the fact is the acceptance just because of the shade of the melanin. Yeah.
That we've always had like white faces around us, because that had come up when we were talking about white people will say, well, how come they get to call it a Black group or whatever? If we called it a white group, we wouldn't. So we had been talking about that. And that was really helpful to put that in perspective, that like everywhere we look in North America, there are white groups of people. We don't label them white, but they're all white. And so I do see the need for that support that you were talking about. And I really hope that we can change some of these prejudices. How do I say that? Prejudices. and biases that we have, and that we can walk forward. But it seems like such a big task. But those things I can control. Those things I can work on. What would you say is the solution, or what can we do to help change this way that we are in North America, and that make it a place that we're all the same, like we're not judged by the color of our skin when we walk into a room, that you're not, and all of my friends of color. So I'm talking to you, representing the Black community, but also I have talked to a Filipino friend who has had the looks. She's had people leave her out of situations, and I think anyone of color other than white right now in North America has felt that sting, and so what can we do to help with the situation?
Yeah. So naturally, as people, we have our comfort zones. We tend to go to familiar. It's just, at churches, if we're not physically meeting again yet, but we like to go and sit in the same spot, talk to generally the same people, eat the same foods. We're comfortable, and we're curious to some degree, but to a limit for many of us. And one of the things I would say is, because white people might be like, well, what do you want me to do? What do you want? Do you want me to apologize? Do you want and I've kind of heard the undertones of well, what do you want? Come on, let's get over this. Let's move on. And really, yeah, definitely. Let's move forward. The way that I believe that people, we as the human race, right? There's only one race, it's the human race, right? We have different colored skin, but we're one human race. But in order for us to move forward, I believe we have to be honest with ourselves. And it doesn't say, I'm not saying white people need to be honest with themselves. I'm saying we, because we all have unconscious biases that we don't even realize we have them. We all prejudge people and often situations. And some of us may actually have very racist tendencies. And so the challenge is for me, when I see a situation or I know, or I think something, questioning myself, why do I feel that way? Why did I say that? Or why am I thinking that way? Because the only person that you can change is yourself. And so to be able to, and that's, it's not like soul searching, because I think as you live your life, you encounter things and you catch yourself. And when you become aware, your sensitivity is heightened. There might be a situation where you're in a group and it's all white people and somebody says something, or flip it. Maybe it's in a group and it's all Black people and somebody says something against another culture, against someone that's white. And I think it's about us as people having the courage to challenge it in a way to build a bridge, to say, what do you mean by that? It's just like the guy that asked me, he said that Natasha Rubin, that's not a Black name, or it's not you don't look like a Natasha Rubin. And I just simply asked a question. The question out of curiosity created conversation. And reaching out, Heather, you reaching out to the people in your life that that you have a relationship with, in a Black friend, to say, hey, I want to know more. I want to hear your story. Because when you hear the story of someone that you have a relationship with, it adds a totally different context. You can watch documentaries and watch things, and that's all great. But when you know the story of the person that you're working beside for 25 years, or your neighbor next door, and it's out of relationship and openness that I believe that we're able to move forward. And this season right now is incredible, because it's not just conversations that are happening amongst friends and peers. These are from the very top, right? I don't care what you think about our current government, whatever, but leadership. I work for one of the biggest banks in the country. And from the very top of these institutions, there's an acknowledgement that we need to have conversation, the uncomfortable conversation because it is uncomfortable. It's
Yeah.
awkward. Like when you start, it's like, oh, what do I say? And it's okay because
Yeah.
it's always going to feel that way. But typically once you engage, it's so beneficial, mutually beneficial. So conversations, acknowledgement, if you're a leader of an organization, specific strategies to how to really be inclusive of Black people. Because you could say you have Black people in your organization, but do you include, just like we have strategies for women, to have women at leadership tables? It's very important that Black people are represented, qualified Black people, because nobody wants a job that they're not qualified for. And being open and having those conversations and having specific strategies to move the needle. And at different times in history, there has been policies implemented you can't legislate people's minds, but sometimes there has to be intentional strategies to make the shift in society. Yeah. If not, you and I would still be living back days when women couldn't vote, right? There had to be actual things to shift it so that people can become more aware and have conversations. So I would say that would be my, and the last thing would be is to acknowledge the systemic biases, systemic racism, the history of our North American culture. Because your parents or your grandparents might have come here, but they came here on their own accord. They came here for opportunity. Black people who were in North America were taken from as slaves 4 generations ago from Africa and brought to the West, right? And then there was slavery and like the systemic things that kind of keeps going that continues to limit. So just acknowledging the history and acknowledging that there are racial issues that as a country we can work on.
I agree. And to be willing to walk with other people when they're going through times like this. Like in other times in our history, there may be other people groups, and right now there are other people groups who are struggling. For us to not minimize it, for us to not say, well, I just don't see it, or it doesn't affect me on a personal level. But for us to want to walk through with people who are struggling, it's hurt in some regards. I mean, you handle it a lot different than some other people might. So there are some other hurts that would be deeper or different, but still there. And regardless of how big or small, I think we need to be listening and walking through with our friends and our family who are hurting. And so, Natasha, thank you so much for sharing with us. I really appreciate that. But also, I just really love our friendship, and I love how it has gotten even deeper and more rich. And you are just such it sounds so cliche, but like you really have blessed my life. You have done so much for me that I want to listen, I want to grow, I want to learn, and I want to see just all the success for you and what you're doing in your life, and for other women of color and men of color who this is not right. This is not what goes on, and we need to make some changes. So thank you for sharing with us. Appreciate
You're welcome.
You so much.
This was so great.
I'm gonna sign off. Say goodbye to everyone now. I hope you have a great day with me.
So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was encouraging for you, and it's given you some things to think about and some challenges. If you want to chat about anything, let's do that. Let's reach out to one another, reach out to me or Jay or anyone that you know that you can have a conversation with, and just talk about things that maybe are uncomfortable, but that's a good place to start. It's okay to be uncomfortable. So we do know that God values friendship, and I'm sorry this week I didn't have a specific scripture for you, but I do know that we meet God in our relationships with other people. We meet him in the Bible. We meet him in so many places, and let's continue to be open to that and pursuing him as we pursue relationships with one another. And keep your eyes out for more information coming this week, either to the Facebook page or maybe your inbox, I'm not sure. But it will have information about when we actually can meet next week in person. So July 12th, we will be meeting in person. We totally understand if you are not able to make it. We don't want anybody to feel pressure to be somewhere that they're concerned or worried about, but we will have steps, lots of precautions that we're taking to meet together again and make everyone feel comfortable in that situation. So have a great day. Love you all.